Okay, hi everybody. Thank you for coming. We have many dedications tonight. Refuah Shlema for Notah ben Zeisel, Baruch ben Frida, and for the liberation of Eretz Yisrael from all of its enemies. Unfortunately, we have newer enemies we have to add to the equation. The safe return home of soldiers and hostages, the lasting unity of Am Yisrael, and for all of those whose health has been affected by the war, as well as we are davening for the release of Arvin Netanel ben Sonia, the young man in Iran that has been sentenced to death. Aliyat Yitzchak Hirsh ben Eliezer, and we also have a dedication from Judy Greenwald in loving memory of her mother, Sima Breinah bat Elchonen, whose yahrzeit is the 8th of Av, and her brother, Mishael ben Dov Aryeh, whose yahrzeit is Tisha B'Av. Also the late father of Carol Stern, Aaron ben Meshulam, whose yahrzeit is on the 8th of Av, and the Aliyat Neshamot of Serel Zlota bat Beryl on her 44th yahrzeit, which was on Chav Zayin Tammuz, the mother of Tzipora Leah Chana Ramberg. We also have an anonymous contribution for the nitzachon of all of our chayalim, all of our hostages to return safe and totally healthy to their homes, Hashem's protection of Klal Yisrael, the Geula Shlema in these days. Additionally, in honor of Rena Kwestel's birthday, from her husband Mark, and for the safety of all of Klal Yisrael. So again, we very much appreciate the Achzakas Torah. May it be a zechus for all of the families who have contributed. May it be a zechus for Klal Yisrael generally. I do appreciate people coming. I understand that this is a time of great anxiety. We've been in a state of war. Well, really, since 1948, but actively since October 7th, since Simchas Torah itself. And just as that seems to be winding down, as the old sorrows are getting, Baruch Hashem, dissipating, although not gone yet, we then get hit with the new sorrows. And the sorrows are mischadshos, as the Gemara gives the example of the person who encountered a wolf and was saved and felt real good till he met a lion. And, things get worse and worse and worse. And once again, the ultimate lesson is, as the Mishnah says, Ein lanu lihishayin ela al Avinu shebashamayim, that all of our systems are not going to help us. We need to have a good army. We need to do all these things. But ultimately, it's going to be our bitachon in HaKadosh Baruch Hu that is going to bring the Hatzalah to Am Yisrael. So it is a scary time, but it's precisely, like the Brisker Rav used to say in a different context, it's very easy to be a Baal Bitachon when you have $100,000 in the bank. Of course, that was going back in the 40s when $100,000 went much further. He says the real test of a Baal Bitachon is when there's zero money in the bank. Do you trust in Hashem? So good. When things are b'shalom, things are comfortable, things are good. I have bitachon. I believe in Hashem. I have bitachon. It's precisely when we're going through adversity that is when real bitachon comes out. So Be'ezras Hashem, if you have bitachon, you have everything. If you don't have bitachon, you have nothing. And therefore, we just have to hold on in this difficult time. People ask me every day. I get many shilas. Should we leave Eretz Yisrael, or if we're in Chutz La'aretz, should we come? Should we stay? Now, again, I'm not going to give people a one answer fit all. These are very individual questions, and I certainly am not a navi. I cannot take achrayas for someone's safety or someone's family's safety. But the overall feeling is that wherever you are, you need Hashem's siyata d'shmaya. Wherever you are, life is very, very dangerous. So, if you're going to face dangers one way or the other, let's do it here, in a land in which there's a special divine hashgacha. And in many, many ways, on one hand, people say, oh, the fact that these threats come out in the 9 days, or maybe even Tisha B'Av, that means very bad, because these are bad days for Klal Yisrael. But in reality, the Navi Zechariah tells us that it's bedavka those days that are going to become sason and simcha as we approach the Geula. It's kind of the same. Hezbollah is making the same type of mistake as Haman, right? Haman figured, the month of Adar, real bad month for the Jews, because Moshe Rabbeinu died. That's a good time to get him. He didn't realize, or forgot, or whatever it is, that it was a good month for the Jews. Moshe Rabbeinu was born. So Hezbollah thinks, Tisha B'Av, the Churban Beis HaMikdash, sad day. Yeah, But in Tisha B'Av is hidden the light of Mashiach. In Tisha B'Av is hidden the light of redemption. So Be'ezras Hashem, the same miscalculation that Haman HaRasha had, also Persia, right? Haman, Iran, Persia, that Haman HaRasha had in calculating a day to destroy the Jewish people. May Hamas, Iran, Hezbollah, all of which funded by Iran, may they be subject to the same miscalculation. And the very day that they think is so bad for Klal Yisrael, that day should turn out to be a wonderful day of Yeshua. And, you know, if Tisha B'Av is a day of Mashiach, Ma Tov U'ma Noim, but even if, Chas v'Shalom, this year it's not, it can still have the sod of some type of redemptive koach that's going to be there, even if it doesn't manifest itself in the fullness yet of Mashiach. Okay. In fact, I mentioned a number of times, you probably heard it before, that, you know, number one, Tisha B'Av, we don't recite Tachanan, because it is called a moed, it is called a holiday. And there's an old minhag, old Yerushalmi minhag, I don't know, old Yerushalmi women who have the old minhagim, that the afternoon of Tisha B'Av, they sweep the house in honor of Mashiach coming. They clean the house to prepare the house for Mashiach. You know, my good friend and neighbor, Rabbi Machlis, many of you might have heard of the Machlis family, and unfortunately Rebbe Machlis passed away a few years ago, but these are people who are amazing in their hospitality, in their achnasas orchim. You know, a typical Shabbos, they'll have 50, 60 people, like for every meal, sometimes even more than that. So Rebbe Machlis was nifteris a few years ago, but Rabbi Machlis carries on with his children and sons-in-law, daughters-in-law, a whole extended family. So it's kind of a legend, Machlis. So, you know, there is a halacha in the Shulchan Aruch that a Jewish home should have a part that's unpainted, zecher l'chorban. Zecher l'chorban. Now, it's machlokas if it's obligatory today, but it is proper to have something unpainted, zecher l'chorban. So in Rabbi Machlis's house, he has a square, an amma, a cubit by cubit, amma by amma, that's unpainted, but he keeps a permanent can of paint and a paintbrush right next to the unpainted part, as if to say, amma min bi'amuna Shlema, that pretty soon we're going to be able to paint that unpainted corner. It's kind of an affirmation of faith. Side by side with the Zecher L'Chorban is the Amuna in the Geula Shlema. So I want to talk a little bit, obviously, about the fast of the 9th of Av and the 9 days, the period of Avelos. So the first point is a very interesting observation that Rav Yosef Dov Soloveitchik of Yeshiva University made a number of years ago. I think other Sfarim say it as well, in which he pointed out that the public mourning over the Beis HaMikdash operates in an opposite direction than the private mourning we have when we lose a relative. When we lose a relative, God forbid, a person loses a spouse or a child or a parent, whatever it would be. So Avela starts off very, very severe, right? For Shiva, you don't even leave the house, etc. And then it gradually gets more lenient. So after Shiva, we have a Shloshim period, which is somewhat strict. And then for most relatives, other than parents, Avelis is over after 30 days. No, even for a spouse, 30 days. For father and mother, it goes on for a year. But certainly the Avelis after 30 days for the rest of the year is much more lenient than 30 days. So we go Shiva, we go Shloshim, we go Yud Beis Chodesh, and the trajectory of Avelut is min hachamor, from the severe Avelis, el hakal, towards leniency. And after the Yud Beis Chodesh, there's no Avelis at all, except on the yahrzeit. Once a year, you observe mourning equivalent to the 12 months. The din of a yahrzeit is like the Yud Beis Chodesh for a parent. Now, by contrast, when we look at the designated weeks of the year, where we mourn officially over the Chorban Beis HaMikdash. Now, I say officially because the truth of the matter is, the Shulchan Aruch says in the second sif in the Shulchan Aruch that a person should cry over the Chorban Beis HaMikdash all the time. We should mourn the loss of the Beis HaMikdash every single day of the year. That is why The old custom in Klal Yisrael that is recorded in the Shulchan Aruch was called Tikkun Chatzos. People would get up, or if they didn't sleep yet, they would at midnight, and they would sit on the ground, and they would say prayers for the over the Chorban Beis Hamikdash and for the restoration of the Shekhinah. So, in truth, Avelos over the Chorban is something that we should always have, but the designated period where it's most intense is the 3 weeks. Now, if you think about it, here we're moving in the opposite direction. We start with the 3 weeks, which is, relatively lenient. So, first of all, if you're Sephardi, you don't even have a 3 weeks thing. There's nothing you do during the 3 weeks. But Ashkenazim are stricter in these minhagim. So we don't get haircuts. We don't listen to music. Then you get into the 9 days. In the 9 days, we don't do laundry. We don't eat meat or drink wine, except on Shabbos. And then there's actually a higher level of chumrah, the week of Tisha B'Av. That's going to start after Shabbos, the week in which that's even stricter. And then the crescendo, the highest point, is Tisha B'Av itself. So with private mourning, you start off easy and you start off hard and you end easy. With public mourning, you start easy and you end hard. So why is the direction of the mourning in opposite directions between the public mourning over the Chorban and the private mourning over a person's bereavements? So Rav Soloveitchik wanted to suggest that is because the purpose of mourning is very, very different. Why is there a category of halacha that's called mourning? Avelis. Why am I obligated to mourn over a parent, over a child, over a spouse, over a brother, or over a sister? Well, there are a few elements. One element is, this is kavod, this is a respect. Certainly for a parent, a lot of the yesod of Avelis it's an expression of kibbud aviyim. So even if, God forbid, somebody didn't even feel close to their parents, there's a certain obligation of kavod. That's one aspect. But there's another aspect, that Avelis is a very deep psycho-spiritual method of inner healing. That when a person loses someone that they care about and they love, their lives are often shattered. They feel they can't move on. They don't know how they could be reintegrated in a normal life. Everything stops. Everything's shattered. Even breathing can become laborious. So Avelos is a mechanism where slowly but surely the mourner can be guided to re-entry in normal life. So for the first 7 days, don't even leave the house. People come to you. Afterwards, it's like putting your toe in a cold water swimming pool. Put your toe in, it's cold, but you get used to it. La'at, la'at, meaning the purpose, or at least one of the purposes of private mourning is to enable a person whose life was shattered to re-enter human existence. That doesn't mean you forget your grief. The grief is never forgotten. The grief is ever present. But on some level, it might be compartmentalized. So you have part of your brain, but then you go on. Because it's God's will that as long as we're alive, we should partake in life. It's God's will that in spite of tragedy and loss, we go on. In fact, the Medrash has different criticisms. Hashem says, if a person is mourning and mourning after the year or whatever it is, Hashem says, are you more merciful than me? So the whole purpose of Avelis is to take a shattered person and give him a re-entry procedure. When I became a rabbi in Silver Spring, even before I officially became a rabbi, one of the members of the shul that I was going to become rabbi of tragically lost a son. The son was 10 years old. So almost my first duty, even though I was not even the rabbi of the shul yet, was to be officiate at the funeral. And it was a little complicated issue because this man's wife, the mother of this child, was a non-Jewish woman. So the child technically was not Jewish, but he converted, but whatever it would be. Whatever. That didn't make a difference in the morning. But there's a certain mental picture that I had in my mind that has stayed with me for more than 30 years. And that is, the mother was there, of course. It was her child. The mother was there. The father was there. They were divorced. They were not married anymore. And after the Jewish Levaya, the father was surrounded by people who were offering their comfort. Nicham avelam, hamokam yenachem eschem. And the mother, who was not Jewish, although she was invited to participate, but she didn't want it for whatever reason, because she felt it was a Jewish thing. The mother left the cemetery alone. I'm not saying that was the right thing to do, and mistakes may have very well been made. But what it highlighted to me was the therapeutic aspect of Jewish mourning rituals. They heal the soul. They give a person a solidarity of community, that you're not alone. People care about you. And if people care about you, Hashem cares about you. So that's why Avelos moves from the more chamor to the more lenient, because it's a mechanism to get you back into life. Now, when it comes to the Churban Beis HaMikdash, we have exactly the opposite problem. How many of us are so devastated over the loss of the Beis HaMikdash that we can't go on with our lives? How many of us are shattered? How many of us are destroyed? How many of us need the therapy of being comforted? I tell the students in Ohr Sameach, this is a new excuse if you don't show up to davening in the morning. And the Rebbe says, why weren't you at Minyan? So the kid can say, I was so devastated over the Churban Beis HaMikdash, I could not get out of bed. I was destroyed. Well, frankly, I don't think that's going to be too credible, because that's not the way we are. Our problem is not that the Churban Beis HaMikdash is so devastating to us that I can't go on. Our problem is I don't feel anything at all. So the purpose of mourning over the Beis HaMikdash is not to get you out of your devastation, but to put you into your devastation in the hope, and this hope is not always realized either, that by external behaviors, first not listening to music and not getting married, and then not cutting your hair, gradually, the chitzonius, the externals, make me realize what it is that I've lost. It's an amazing thing. It's a fascinating idea. Avelos over the Churban is not to get us out of grief, but is to put us into grief. So we have a sense that there's something that we're missing in our lives. The Gemara gives the Medrash Eicha gives a fascinating story about one of the rabbis after the Churban Beis HaMikdash was recounting all of the different sufferings that generation had gone through, the deaths, the injuries, the gezeros against the Torah. And he enumerated many things. And one of them asked that this earlier rabbi who lived during the Churban, he only mentioned some of these things, meaning how could you mention more things than him? I don't remember the exact number, but it was something like the earlier generation mentioned 50 tzaras, and you mentioned 200 tzaras. How could you mention 200 if the earlier generation said 50? So the answer the Medrash gives is a fascinating answer. That earlier generation was so close to the Churban that as soon as they began remembering it, they would be consumed with sobbing and grieving, and they couldn't go on. They couldn't go on beyond what they said. I'm more removed. I feel less connected to it. So I could dispassionately talk about all the atrocities because they were not directly connected to me. The difference would be, let's say, somebody who was, if people know, if any of you have parents or grandparents who were Holocaust survivors. And it's very, very well known that Holocaust survivors usually do not like to talk about their experiences in the camps, simply because they start talking about it, it's too much. It's too much. So we can sit and we can go to Yad Vashem and we can go through all of the things that happened, but the people who actually went through it, might often not even be able to talk about it, and the like. So this is our problem. Our problem in mourning the Beis HaMikdash is we don't know what it is we're mourning about. There's a famous story that's part of Israeli, secular culture even. It's just a famous story in the Six-Day War in June 1967, when we finally gained back the old city of Yerushalayim, and we gained back the Har HaBayit, the famous statement on the radio, Har HaBayit biyadenu, Matagur, the Har HaBayit is in our hands. Wonderful thing. So some of the first chayalim who came to the Har HaBayit were the Hester chayalim, and they, of course, were overjoyed. They were dancing and singing, but they also were crying, because remember, after all, at the end of the day, the Kotel Ma'aravi is not the Beis HaMikdash. It's not even a wall of the Beis HaMikdash. It is the remnant of the wall of the Har HaBayit. So simultaneously with the joy is also the Avelit. So they were crying and sobbing. And a few feet away, there was a Chiloni soldier, not religious at all. And he was crying and sobbing. And his friends asked him, "What are you crying and sobbing about? You don't even know what this is." And he said, "I'm crying and sobbing because I don't know why they're crying and sobbing." And that's something that causes me great grief. The truth of the matter is, the statement that the Chiloni soldier made is a statement that we can make about ourselves. We should cry because we don't know what it is to cry about. We should cry because we don't even know what any of this is about. Someone went to the Sfas Emes and said, "What do I do? I can't cry over the Churban Beis HaMikdash. I don't know what it is." A person who was born blind, who never saw, how could they understand color? In fact, to this day, I don't fully understand the Helen Keller stories. I really don't know how that even works. A person who was born deaf, how can they understand music? How can we appreciate what the Beis HaMikdash was? We've never seen it. It's been gone from our lives. Our lives have adapted without it. So he said to the Sfas Emes, "What do I cry over if I can't cry over the Beis HaMikdash?" And the Sfas Emes answered exactly what the Chayal said. Cry over your neshama that cannot cry over the Churban Beis HaMikdash. So what is the Beis HaMikdash? A beautiful building, to be sure. The first temple was Shlomo HaMelech's building. The second Beis HaMikdash was initially relatively simple, but Herod built it up. Amazing thing that Herod had such credit in this, the big Russia that he was. And Chazal say about Herod's binyan, and that's a typical picture you see of the temple, that he who did not see Herod's temple did not see a beautiful building. So sure, the Beis HaMikdash was a beautiful building. It was one of the, I don't know if it ever made the official list of the wonders of the world, but it was one of the wonders of the ancient world. But that's not what it is. After all, there are other beautiful buildings. There's the Taj Mahal. Even in Yerushalayim, the Belzer Beis Knesset is very close in appearance to the Beis HaMikdash. Baruch Hashem, it's a holy place, the Beis Knesset, but it's not the Beis HaMikdash. So the issue is not the building. The building is a symbol of Hashem's Shekhinah being with us. So the most important thing is the pasuk. When Hashem first commanded the construction of a temple, which was the Mishkan in the Midbar. So Hashem said, "V'yasu li mikdash," make for me a holy place. V'shachanti b'socham, so I will live, I will reside in them. And it's a well-known pshat, although it's not a chazal actually, but it's a well-known statement from different svarim like the Shalah HaKadosh. It does not say, make for me a temple, so I will dwell in it. Make for me a mikdash, I will dwell in you. The real Beis HaMikdash is the heart and soul of the individual who brings Hashem into their lives. That's the statement from the Sefer Charedim, been set to music. Bilvavi Mishkan Evnech. In my heart, I will build a sanctuary for Hashem. Asuli Mikdash. B'shachanti b'socham. Now, if that's true, that the Mikdash is symbolic of Hashem's Shekhinah within us, then how does the Beis HaMikdash get destroyed? When because of us, the Shekhinah is not, in other words, you just do it in reverse. When the Shekhinah is in our heart and our soul, we have this tangible Beis HaMikdash. When the Shekhinah is not in our heart and our soul, we lose that Beis HaMikdash. That's why the Medrash says about the Bayis Rishon, the first temple, that when Nebuchadnezzar destroyed the Beis HaMikdash, I mean, he was not here. I mean, his general destroyed it, but when under his rule, the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, he was very proud because he said, I destroyed the house of God. I vanquished God. I defeated the God of Israel. I'm more powerful. And God responded to him, I wasn't living there anymore. You could not destroy my house. But I moved. You were destroying an abandoned building. Which means, I can't give you a date here, which means the actual Churban Beis HaMikdash was not on the 9th of Av. A physical building was burnt on the 9th of Av. But at whatever critical point it was, and I can't give you a date, that there was no longer the Shekhinah within our hearts and our souls, Hashem moved. Baruch Hashem, He gave us a forwarding address. We still can direct our tefillos to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but He moved. When He moved, anybody could destroy the building. As He told Nebuchadnezzar, you're grinding up grain that's already ground. No big deal. Don't think you're any big shot that accomplished anything. When Hashem is not in the building, any kid could just set it on fire. Not a big deal. So, the Panovich Rav used to bring a beautiful, well, not a beautiful, but a very moving medrash in Parshas Toldos. You know, it says when Yaakov, when Yaakov impersonated Esav, and he went to Yitzchak looking like, looking like Esav. So the pasuk says, "V'yarach es reach begadav." Yitzchak smelled the aroma of the garments, and he said, "This is the reach of the field that Hashem has blessed." So there are many, many interpretations on this, but Rashi brings one chazal that bigadav, garments, without the vowels, could be read bogdav, that Yitzchak saw the future Jews who would be treacherous, who would be Rishoyim. And he said, they too are blessed by God, even the Rishoyim of the Jews. And the Medrash gives a concrete example. It talks about a fellow called Yosef Meshisa. I'm not sure what Meshisa even means, but that was the appellation. Yosef Meshisa was a bad guy. He was a collaborator with the Romans. Just like there were Jews who collaborated with the Nazis, there were Jews who collaborated with the Romans. And when the temple was being destroyed, Titus wanted to give him a reward for his services. He told him, go into the Beis HaMikdash, take a treasure of your choice. There's a lot of gold there. And whatever you take, you get to keep. This is our honoring you for your services. He went in, talk about grabbing too much, he took the menorah. This is before the Arch of Titus. So the Romans said, well, not that. That's too much for you. So they took the menorah, and of course that appears on the triumphal arch of Titus. So they then said, go back and take something else. He said, if I have angered my Creator once, I will not anger my Creator again. And they offered him all sorts of things. They offered him like 3 years of tax revenue from the Jewish population, etc. And he said, no, And they finally threatened him. They said, you go, or we'll kill you. And he died a horrible death. He was tortured, and he died a horrible death rather than enter the Beis HaMikdash a second time. Now the question is obvious. Obviously, he had no problem going in the first time. He went in to take the menorah. He was not a righteous person. He was an evil person. So what happened? Why did he change? The Panovich Rebbe used to say, because being in the Beis HaMikdash changed him. Being connected to godliness changed him. It brought out the hidden elokus, the hidden godliness of his soul. If you went to the Beis HaMikdash, you were transformed. You were different. You were a different person. What you were before you went in isn't the way you were when you went in. And by the way, there's a remiss to this in the Navi Yecheskel. The Navi Yecheskel has prophecies about the third Beis HaMikdash, the future Beis HaMikdash. And when he describes the architectural design, which is complicated really to match it up. Now, Tanakh doesn't have pictures. That's the problem. I mean, Art Scroll will give you pictures, but even that depends on commentaries, right? So the actual text, it's very, very difficult, whether it's the Mishkan, whether it's the first Beis HaMikdash, whether it's the third Beis HaMikdash. It's difficult to reconstruct it exactly. But one of Yecheskel's rules is very interesting. The Beis HaMikdash has many gates, 13 gates, one for every tribe. And if you don't know what tribe you belong to, there's a 13th gate for everybody. But the rule is, if you entered by one gate, you must leave by another gate. Do not leave by the same gate that you entered. And symbolically, there's no reason that's given for that. But symbolically, that's a powerful message. You don't come out the same way you went in. You got to be changed. You got to be transformed. Right? Don't go out the same way you went in. Right? Just take those words and you see what it means in a spiritual sense. So, this is our avoda. Our avoda is to rebuild the Beis HaMikdash that was destroyed. But what does it mean to rebuild the Beis HaMikdash that was destroyed? Does it mean we bulldoze the mosque, Al-Aqsa, and the Mosque of Omar? Halachically, the answer is no, although some would disagree with that. Halachically, the Rambam says very, very clearly that the actual physical construction of the Beis HaMikdash is a job of Mashiach when he reveals himself. And Rashi says even more dramatically that we don't even build a third temple at all. Comes down min hashamayim. So our job is not to build a physical Beis HaMikdash at all. So in what way do we build a Beis HaMikdash? By making our heart and our soul a place for the Shekhinah. And the more of us that do it, and the deeper the Avodah that each of us goes through, there will at some point, and I can't tell you what the critical mass is, there will be a critical mass. When there is, just as V'yasuli Mikdash V'shachanti B'tocham, it works the opposite. Shachanti B'tocham, Asuli Mikdash. When the Shekhinah dwells in you, you have a Beis HaMikdash. So our job is to rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. But not by bricks or mortar or stone or gold or silver. But by making ourselves have lives that are worthy of being a place where HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes in. And as the Kotzker Rebbe used to say, where does God live? And his answer is, God lives wherever you let him in. You let him in, he lives in you. You don't let him in, he's very polite. He's not going to push his way. I mean, he's giving you life anyway, that much is true. But he's not going to push his way in. He goes where he's invited. Right, so that's our job. So, here's the thing. Everyone knows the well-known Gemara, this is certainly no chiddush to anybody, that differentiates between the first Beis HaMikdash and the second Beis HaMikdash. That the first Beis HaMikdash was destroyed because of the worst of eros that existed. Idolatry, sexual immorality, murder, These are the big three averos that a Jew must give up their life before they transgress. So the first Beis HaMikdash had the worst of the worst. The second Beis HaMikdash that was destroyed 490 years later, day to day, Tisha B'Av, 490 years later, by the Romans, most of the Jews were halachically observant. So why was the Beis HaMikdash destroyed? So the Gemara's answer in Maseches Yuma, there are actually other answers, and I hope to get to it, is because of sinat chinam, groundless hatred between Jews. And the Gemara says the following observation: Bo u're'eh, come and see. The first Beis HaMikdash that was destroyed for the worst averos was only destroyed for 70 years. The second temple was built 70 years later. Right around the time of Ezra, 1 year before Ezra came. The second Beis HaMikdash that was destroyed for sinat chinam, well, the Gemara already remarked it had been more than 1,000 years, and we just add almost 2,000 years now. So you see what sinat chinam is. But in reality, sinat chinam is hard to define. Sinat chinam, hatred for no reason. Who on earth hates anybody for no reason? I mean, you ask anybody in the world. I mean, ask Hamas, are you in favor of hating people for no reason? Even they're going to say, well, no, I don't hate people for no reason. I have reasons. So everybody has reasons. So what are Chazal telling you? Even if you think you have reasons, the reasons aren't good. The reasons are not. Sinas chinam, all of those things, the rivalries, the disagreements, the putting people down, not caring, creating cliques, rejecting people because if they're to the right of me, they're fanatics. And if they're to the left of me, they're apikorsim. Right? That's how people often look at their religious orientation. If they're frummer than me, they're fanatic. If they're not as observant as me, they're apikorsim. It's where I am, whoever the I is speaking, which is emes. All of this is sinas chinam. And this caused the Churban Beis HaMikdash. I've said many times already, forgive me for repeating, that if there was any silver lining in the tragedies of October 7, it was a wake-up call, because if you remember, before October 7, the country was being torn apart with this judicial reform debate that somehow became a religious secular issue. I mean, that itself is very difficult, but it did become a wedge issue of religious secular. And people, I mean, now it looks so small compared to what we're going through, but at the time it was not small. People were talking about the end of the state of Israel, the collapse of the democracy. Capitalists with major investments were talking about pulling out tens of millions of dollars. Chayalim were saying they were not going to report to miluim or even to active duty. Baruch Hashem, they did, but who knows if that emboldened Hamas because of the statements they weren't going to report. And people were saying there's no way the society would last. So came the tragedy of October 7. And what happened was there was a newfound unity in Am Yisrael. Religious, secular, we were one nation. All the tzitzis campaigns, and there were Charedim who enlisted in the army, and Charedim who didn't enlist in the army still brought food and medicine and helping out, making tzitzis, whatever it would be. And there was a new respect for all segments of Klal Yisrael, that everybody does their part, we're on the same page, we're going through the same thing. Like Benjamin Franklin said, we got to hang together, or else we will surely hang separately. And there was mamish that feeling that we hadn't had in many years. It's really, really sad that it took those calamities to bring it out. But it brought it out. And that in turn brought us closer to Geula. It brought us closer to Geula. But like an elastic rubber band, you stretch out the band. But at some point it just snaps back to where it is. What I feared would come to pass is unfortunately coming to pass. And that is, we get tired after a while. We get battle fatigued. This struggle has been going on really, really long. And now we have the new struggles and the like. And as a result, we kind of revert to our old bad habits. The divisiveness, the backstabbing, the condemnations, the name-calling, the coldness, the indifference. Baruch Hashem, we haven't snapped back to as bad as it was. There's still, Baruch Hashem, a lot of beautiful, beautiful achdus that exists. So I don't want to suggest that we haven't progressed in some degree. But we've lost a lot of the progress that we've made. Sinas Chinim is like this cancer. You think it's in remission, or you think the chemotherapy is controlling it. And then what happens is it just rears its ugly head. You thought you got rid of it, but you didn't get rid of it. It comes back, polarizes, divides. And I want to make a point that Sinas Chinim is not only what you might call hot Sinas Chinim. There's also cold Sinas Chinim. Hot Sinas Chinim is, you're a Malek, whatever it is. Cold Sinas Chinim is simply indifference, callousness, not caring beyond your group. This is my group. This is who I care about. I mean, there was, I don't want to get into this because God forbid I myself don't want to be guilty of Lashon Hara at this time. It's not right, so I'm not going to mention any names. But there was a fairly prominent rabbi who was making a speech against the military service and this and that. Okay, whatever the ideological issue was. But at some point, one of the yeshiva students brought up the question, but what about feeling the pain of the chayalim, called no sayol, to go to a funeral? Good. In other words, even if the position is we don't enlist in the army, and I'm not going to debate that right now, but at least recognize the sacrifice, recognize the pain. And unbelievably so, the statement was made, why should you feel their pain? They're not your group. They're not your people. This was frankly unbelievable to me. If somebody were to say, I really don't want to get into debates here. If somebody were to say, I don't believe yeshiva students should be drafted, that is you can agree or disagree. I don't really care right now. But that is a debatable, discussable position. You can debate it. But to say, I don't care what happens to them because they're not my group, that's incomprehensible. There is no possible way that can be justified. Huh? Say again? Yeah, 100%. That's a very good. That's a very good proof. We feel sorry for Sister's mother every Rosh Hashanah. The 100 kolot. So again, maybe the rabbi was misunderstood. Maybe I misunderstood. I'm not interested in singling anybody out on that. But all I'm saying is, this is what Sinat Chinim is. Sinat Chinim is not only active hatred, but the indifference to what's going on outside of my particular group. Sinat Chinim is predicated on us versus them within Klal Yisrael. And there is no us versus them. There's only us. Now that doesn't mean every idea is legitimate. Obviously, there are ideas that a person opposes, debates, argues against. And that's legitimate. That doesn't mean you roll over. But you do so with a basic respect and a basic love for the other person. And this is true even pragmatically. Once again, forgive me for repeating. I often quote a pasuk in Mishlei, Shlomo HaMelech, the wisest of all people. Kamayim apanim el panim came leifadam liadam, as water reflects the face that you show it, so too the heart of a person reflects what you show that person. What is the pshat? When I look at a reflecting pool of water, Whatever I show the water is what I see in the water. I smile at the water, I see a smiling face. I frown at the water, I see a frowning face. Water reflects back what you show the water. The heart of another human being reflects that which you show that human being. I show a person respect. I show a person love. I show a person validation. I show a person hakaras hatov for whatever it is that they're doing. They will be open and receptive to whatever it is I'm doing. They will appreciate my contribution, whatever it is, because I appreciate their contribution. If, on the other hand, the religious look at the secular and call them Amalek, Russia, and the secular look at the religious and call them or Haredi, I shouldn't say religious, but let's say Haredi, and call them parasite. Where are you going to get in a confrontation, Amalek versus parasite? It just descends and descends and descends, lower and lower and lower and lower, into an endless cycle of invictiveness. So, Shlomo HaMelech was smarter than anybody around today, that's for sure. And he said, just as a matter of human relations, when you have hakaras hatov, you have gratitude and you have respect for the other person, they will come to see your viewpoint as well. Then we see how counterproductive, even pragmatically, the sinas chinam rhetoric is. And especially during this time of year, we need to think about it. This time of year where we're trying to rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. And at the same time, in this time of crisis. Because it's a well-known idea that when there is dissension, when there is machlokas, in Am Yisrael, we become vulnerable to the machlokas of the nations of the world against us. When there's unity within Am Yisrael, there's a protection. For many years, I haven't seen it recently, but for many years, there was an annual survey in the Israeli papers, some of the Israeli papers, where people were asked to list what they considered to be the greatest problems in the state of Israel. And of course, well, this year, of course, the list would be skewed in a certain direction, but over the years, obviously, security issues, terrorism, atomic bomb, whatever it would be, water, cost of housing, we have a lot of problems, religious, secular tensions. One year it was even cost of cottage cheese, which was very, very disheartening, or the lack of butter. Sometimes there are shortages of butter for some reason, and the like. But the number one problem that was listed more than anything else, and this is true whether it was Haredi, Dati Liumi, Chiloni, Masorati, Ashkenazi, Sfardi, Hasidic, Misnaged, whichever group you go to, the number one problem they listed was disunity among Jews. So we have a good instinct, we have a gut sense that all of this machlokas is going to turn around and bite us, destroy us, harm us spiritually for sure, and unfortunately even harm us in a physical sense as well. So we have to think about this very, very carefully. Now I know, Mark Twain once remarked about the weather. Everybody talks about the weather, but nobody ever does anything about it. And we could substitute sinas chinam for weather and have the same statement. Everybody talks about how bad sinas chinam is, and it's kind of like, okay, so we got to talk about that during the 3 weeks until Tisha B'Av. Okay, then we get that out of the way. Okay, Elul's coming up. Okay, we got to talk about Shuvah. We kind of look at these things as topics for certain times of year to be discussed, and then we don't really give it thought afterwards. We don't really think about it afterwards. And I include myself in the indictment. But we have to think about the idea of building people up, respecting people, gratitude, hakaras hatov, appreciation. And if sometimes people say, well, I'm a religious Jew, why do I have to show appreciation to the secular so they'll appreciate me? Why don't they appreciate me so then I'll appreciate them? Why do I have to be the first one? The answer is because somebody has to be the adult in the room. That's all. If you have Torah, and you have Musar, and you have Midas, and you have guidance, then yeah, we got to take the first step. I mean, this is a problem in marriage counseling all the time, right? Somebody says, show your wife, that you love her and she'll love you back. So the person says, or whichever side it is, well, why can't the other one show me love and I'll love him back? The answer is, somebody got to do something or else nothing ever gets done. So, be the initiator. Seize the moment. Look at the opportunity. Because in reality, there is so much goodness in the Klal Yisrael. Remember Yosef Meshisa, the greatest Russia. I think I mentioned the story recently, the Balatanya writes, that in every Jew, there are hidden reserves of love of Hashem, fear of Hashem, reverence of Hashem. You don't have to learn it. It's there already. It gets covered over. But there are going to be occasions where that comes out. That's going to come out. That's why Daniel Pearl, who intermarried, was not observant in any way. He was the one that was beheaded by ISIS. Or Al-Qaeda, I don't remember. But, they videoed it. His last moments on earth. And they wanted him to renounce his Judaism and embrace Islam. And he said, I am a Jew. That was it. It came out, that moment. So there's greatness. I want to mention, going back a little bit, Parshas Pinchas. I wasn't here. Shivas Rebbe Thomas was Pinchas. So actually, you didn't get a share from me on Parshas Pinchas, the notion of zealousness. But I just want to say one thing about zealousness. And that is, in order to be a zealot for God's glory, if that requires violence, if that requires strong words, if that requires put-downs, it has to be something that you hate. It can't be something that you love. If you love exposing people's shortcomings, then it's none of your business to do so. Rav Chaim Soloveitchik used to talk about the difference between true zealots and false zealots. And he compared it to a housewife who bought a cat because her house was infested with mice. Now, both the housewife and the cat are hopeful that if there are mice, the cat will catch them. But the housewife and the cat are different in this way. The housewife would be much happier if there wouldn't be any mice. The cat would be sorely disappointed. A true zealot does not find joy in exposing people, in ridiculing people, in embarrassing people, in shaming people. Sometimes, maybe, rarely, maybe it has to be done. But it's done with sadness, and it's done out of love for Klal Yisrael. It's not done because you like to expose people's shortcomings. The zealot who just wants to expose, to criticize, to embarrass, to humiliate, is like the cat. That's not a spiritual zealousness. In this way, I want to share with you a beautiful, beautiful vort from Rav Kook. And Rav Kook himself exemplified this midah of loving every Jew unconditionally. And I want to point out that it's interesting. There's a famous statement of Rav Kook, which is a famous statement, but I'm not sure if it really expresses Rav Kook's ultimate philosophy. The famous statement of Rav Kook was that if the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed because of irrational, groundless hatred, it's only going to be rebuilt through irrational, groundless love. If the Churban came because of Sinat Chinam, it'll only be rebuilt because of Avat Chinam. That's a very nice statement, but I tell you the truth. I don't think it encapsulates the essence of Rav Kook's own philosophy. It's kind of, because like this, the connotation of saying the temple gets rebuilt with Avas Chinam is kind of saying about the other person, whoever that is, you're really worthless and I have no reason to love you. But I'll love you anyway. That actually is not Rav Kook's philosophy. Rav Kook's philosophy was not the idea, I love you even though you're worthless. Rav Kook's philosophy is, you're not worthless. There's goodness there. There's greatness there. There's beauty there. Maybe I don't automatically see it. Maybe you don't always see it. It's there. And again, Rav Kook himself comes from a Lubavitcher family, so there are echoes of the Balatanya. In fact, he was a big Talmud. He was not Chabad, of course, but he was a big Talmud of the writings of the elder Rebbe. And this is Rav Shneur Zalman's big idea, that in every Jewish person, there are reservoirs of holiness. So that's why the Avat Chinam statement, which I've said for many, many years, I'm a little less comfortable saying it, because it's not really about Avat Chinam. It's about seeing the value, seeing the goodness, seeing the Kedusha. But in this case, I just want to end with a vort from Rav Kook. And that is, we know that Shmona Esrei, the Amida, even though it's said to have 18 blessings, we know that during the week it actually has 19 blessings. Originally it was 18, and a 19th bracha was added in the days of Rabban Gamliel in Yavne, after the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. And Rabban Gamliel said, we need a bracha against the minim, against the heretics. Now, historians still debate exactly what is the audience, or what are the target that he was aiming at. Many say it was the early Christians, early Jews, who were professing Christianity, who were still intermingling in synagogues and proselytizing and the like. So, Vlamal Shinim is not in the 19th position, but it is the 19th blessing that was added to the Amida, pronouncing a curse on heretics, informers, people who persecute the Jewish people, and the like. So the Gemara describes how this bracha was written. It was written after the rest of Shemona Esrei was already written, and he says, who will be able to write a bracha against the heretics? And they're looking around and looking around, who could write the bracha? Till they find a rabbi who was known as Shmuel HaKatan. Shmuel HaKatan means Shmuel the Humble. And he has pride of authorship. He wrote the bracha, Vlamal Shinim al Tehi Tikva. This is the Gemara in Brachos. So Rav Kook asks the obvious question, what is so difficult about writing a bracha against the heretics? I mean, whoever wrote the other brachas could write this one too. So number one, what is Rabban Gamliel saying? Who is capable of writing this bracha? Number one. And number two, if you needed a special author, what was special about Shmuel HaKatan that he would be the author? So Rav Kook says the following. The bracha of Olam Shinim is very different than the rest of Shemona Esrei. All of Shemona Esrei asks Hashem for blessings. Give me knowledge, help me do tshuva, give me parnasa, give us redemption, rebuild Yerushalayim, accept our prayers, bring peace. Okay, we ask God for brachas. Davening is not about cursing people, it's not about punishing people, it's about asking God to bless us. The one bracha, and the only bracha in Shemona Esrei, that is focused on cursing, on punishments, on retribution, is this bracha. But says Rav Kook, when you ask God even to destroy evil, you don't come with anger, resentment, and hate. Your motivation has to be love for the Jewish people. And therefore I want them to be protected from those who harm them. And if your kavanah is tainted with hatred and anger, the prayer becomes an unacceptable prayer. Because that's a poison in the soul. So Rabban Gamliel basically has the following problem. The bracha has to be written by somebody who doesn't act out of hate, but acts out of love. But we've suffered so much from the Romans, from the Christians, from the heretics. Who is capable? It's like saying, write a prayer against the Nazis. Who could write, or Hamas? Who could write such a prayer and not be consumed with hatred? That's why he said, I can't find the right author. So Shmuel HaKatan finally qualified. Now, we don't know a lot about Shmuel HaKatan. It's very interesting. We know he was an enormous tzaddik. The Gemara in Sanhedrin tells us that one time many sages were seated in a room, and a voice from heaven came down and said, there is one person here who is worthy of having the Shekhinah rest on him like Moshe Rabbeinu. And everybody in the room looked at Shmuel HaKatan. Phenomenally great tzaddik. Very humble, the word katan. But it's interesting, and this is an interesting study in its own right, that sometimes the most famous of the righteous in Chazal have very little impact on the halachic process, meaning, we don't have halachic statements of Shmuel HaKatan that entered the Masorah. Same thing with Yonasan ben Uziel. Hillel had 80 Talmidim. The least significant was Yochanan ben Zakkai, who was a major halachic force. The other 79, including Yonasan ben Uziel, were much greater than Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai. And yet it's almost as if they were not involved in worldly matters. They were not so involved in halacha l'maisa. They were above it. Shmuel HaKatan was above it, so we don't know a lot about him. But in Pirkei Avos, we have one statement of Shmuel HaKatan, and it says, Shmuel HaKatan haya omer. Now, when Pirkei Avos says haya omer, it doesn't just mean he said it once. Haya omer, this was his motto. He used to say it. And the motto is not even his words. It's a pasuk in Mishlei. But he always said it. Binafol o yivcha al tismach. Do not rejoice when your enemy falls. Remember, that's what Hashem said to the angels who wanted to sing a song of praise as the Egyptians were drowning. And Hashem said, Ma'aseh Yadai, these are my creatures drowning. Do not say song. And Hashem quoted this pasuk ahead of time. Binafal yivcha al tismach. Which means we rejoice that there's less evil in the world, for sure. We rejoice that the Jewish people can be spared whatever persecution they're going through. But we don't take personal glee in the destruction of human. I know that, mamish, this week we had the targeted assassination, which kind of is what's putting us in the immediate danger right now. Okay, so was that the right decision? Okay, I'm certainly not going to opine on politics or the like. But in some ways, whatever, we kind of created the danger, but ultimately everything's from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, anyway, so things would happen one way or the other. But you hear Rav Kook's point. Why was Shmuel HaKatan the right person to curse out the heretics and the informers and the apostates? Because he did not take personal glee in their downfall. His kavanah was love for the Jewish people, not hatred for others. And therefore, in fact, I should say that one of the things I always have felt that should be one of the greatest points of pride for us in Israel is the fact that when the IDF, as part of their rules of engagement, tries to minimize civilian casualties, sometimes at great risk to themselves. When these civilian casualties occur, assuming they're innocent, I know that's a whole debate in and of itself, which I'm not going to get into, we feel a lot worse about it than Hamas. Hamas obviously doesn't care about our casualties. That's Parsha. Hamas doesn't care about their casualties. In fact, they rejoice when more of the Palestinians get killed, because that makes Israel look worse and that gives Hamas more currency in the world. They rejoice. It's a simcha. I think it's a tremendous point of pride that we regard the loss of civilian life as a tragedy that maybe we can't avoid, because Hamas places, all of its resources in the middle of schools and hospitals and residential areas. So what are you going to do? But we don't rejoice. We don't dance. We don't sing. We don't say how wonderful it is. We try to fulfill the idea that when your enemy is destroyed, you don't rejoice. You do what you have to do. We're not pacifists. We don't turn the other cheek. Those who try to kill us, we kill. And there's a mitzvah to do so. So we're not talking about not pursuing the objective. But you don't laugh about it. You don't joke about it. You don't have that gleefulness about the loss of life. And that is why only Shmuel HaKatan was able to write the Birkas Haminim. This interpretation came from Rav Kook, who, of course, who exemplified this attitude in every aspect of his life. And particularly at a time when we think about Sinat Chinam and what that means. Of course, Rav Kook was even applying it to non-Jews and real enemies. But even if, that's going pretty far. That's a stretch. But if we're talking about our fellow Jews, that's not so much of a stretch. To recognize their goodness, to recognize their value, to appreciate the beauty of the Jewish soul. And if more and more of us can move in that direction, we make our heart and soul a place for the Shekhinah, and then we have V'shechanti b'socham, and through V'shechanti b'socham, we will be Zeicha to V'yasu li mikdash. So may even this Tisha B'Av not be a fast. There's still a chance we'll get out of the fast this year with Binyan Beis HaMikdash. If Chas V'Shalom we're not Zeicha this year, may it be the last Tisha B'Av of Tainus. And as the Navi Zechariah tells us, it will be a day of Sason V'Simcha, a day of joy and redemption. May we be Zeicha to experience that. Thank you.